and welcome to the Apostolic Pentecostal Church channel. The 2024 iGrow season has arrived, and we are thrilled to have you with us. At APC, we have amazing teachers ready to share the joy of the gospel. If today's lesson resonates with you, spread the love by sharing this episode with a friend or on your socials. Dive deeper into our community at theapc.org or follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, grab your favorite latte and let's dive into the lesson together.
So tonight, we are going to talk about, again, hosting in God's house. And so with that, I want to start with a question. And the question I want to start with is, to you, what is hospitality? And here's why this is important to start. We go back to the first time my wife and I hung out. Just trying to get to know each other and asked a simple question. She was going to school, so I just wanted to know, what are you majoring in? To which she told me, majoring in hospitality. Didn't have a clear understanding of what that was, so my mind just immediately went like Southern hospitality, like just be nice to people. And so my response was, well, that sounds like a waste of time. So not, yeah, right? So not a great start, right? And thank the Lord that it worked out. But I think it's important when we're having a conversation of how to be hospitable or how to host people, that we can have an understanding of what does that even mean. And so when you think of being hospitable or hosting people or hospitality, where does your mind go? What do you think of?
That's the first person you encounter.
The first person you encounter? Good.
I thought the opposite. I thought that from beginning to end, the whole experience feeling welcomed and feeling loved and wanted, never in the way or a burden. Because you could have a good first impression with the first person, but then the second person you meet, if they've got a bad attitude, I mean, that just, ruined the experience. So I think every step of the way feeling welcomed and not a burden or unwanted in any way.
So, good. So typically when in the business world, when you think of hospitality, that is the forefront. You go to a hotel, their hospitality is right there when you come in the front door. That's their desk, they're welcoming you, they're talking to you. When you go to a restaurant, they put their hosts at the front. They want them greeting you. They want them being the first impression. But if we're doing it correctly, it can't stop there. Because that person can do a fantastic job, but if the second person that we meet completely ruins it, what really did we do? So they're both true, right? Hospitality very much is the first impression, the first encounter, but it cannot, and it's crucial that it does not end there. And so why is hospitality important? We've talked about kind of what it is, and Ashley did a good job kind of setting the stage for this next one, but why is it important?
You don't want to feel left out. Like, man, there's been many times that I've been to a church and there's no communication whatsoever, so it's like, do I even exist here? I mean, you're trying to look for friends too. I know your most important part is wanting Jesus.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you have to connect.
Absolutely.
I feel like there are layers to this question, or layers to this word per se, hospitality. Like when I think of that, I think of my home. Like, how do I want people? What is the impression? Like you were saying, your first impression of someone when you bring them to your house. Like, how do you want them to feel? You know, we use our senses a lot when we're in someone else's homes. Like, what do you see? What do you smell? What do you feel? Like touch? Like, you know, we actually are using all of those senses. So when I think of hospitality, that's kind of where my mind goes. Like, if someone were to step into my home, how do I want to make them feel emotionally, but also like comfortably? maybe even aesthetically, you know. I feel like that's just a lot of that is involved into the hospitality, taking like just being kind.
So there's different levels, like
Yeah.
you said, right? There's interaction, but then there's also presentation,
Right.
which both, they work hand in hand. And again, if your entryway looks fantastic, but then I get to the living room, it can't just stop at the beginning. I want to, anybody else with why it's important? I have 2 scriptures to kind of help support this as well. But before we go there, does anybody else want to add, why is hospitality important to you?
Because we're the Jesus that they see.
Okay?
And if they see a grumpy guy or a mean one or 2 arguing, that's the Jesus that they're going to picture.
Good. Yeah.
We lived in Texas for a time, went to work for 3 years or so. We had a hard time finding a church there. We went to a church. We've been in church all of our life, but we felt like complete, total outsiders.
Sure.
Nobody wanted to talk.
Yeah.
It was their own, everybody had their own little cliques. And it's very disheartening. It makes you wonder, do I really want to go here?
Yeah.
Or do I want to find somewhere else?
Yeah.
We ended up going to that church and liking it a lot later,
Hmm.
but it was like a year later.
What changed your
We
perspective?
went to a little home missions for a while, which if anyone has worked in home missions, it's very hard.
Yeah.
But we did that for about a year. And then the other church was right in the town that we lived in, and we were driving. In the meantime, that church had burnt down, and we didn't know it, but it had. And that congregation had to bind together and rebuilt that church.
Yeah.
And when we went back, it was like a complete different group of people.
Wow.
Because the people themselves had bound together.
Yeah.
So they were ready to be welcome, welcome people in. And
Yeah.
I mean,
But when
the
you're
pastor's
1,000
wife is
miles
still my
from
dearest
home,
friend from there,
That's
when
scary.
you're 1,000 miles from home and you don't know anybody, you walk into a church
Yeah.
and nobody says boo.
Yeah.
And then
It's a bad feeling.
that week, and I know that they were trying, I guess, to do good, but I got a form letter.
Yeah.
Just a plain old form letter.
Fill in the blank, Doug.
Yeah.
Well, just thank you for visiting our church, and
Yeah.
I laid across the bed and cried like a baby.
Sure.
I said, I've got to have more than this.
Yeah.
It's in a form letter.
I saw you. I'll come to you in a second.
Yes.
So I want to ask a question here. Had you not, because you said we had been in church, we lived in church all, had you not previously bought into that, we'll just call it a product for the sake, had you not do you think your experience there would have been completely different? Do you think it would have been harder to give a second chance to that church after they ruined
Yes.
the first
Yes,
impression?
yes, very, very much so.
Go ahead.
So I was listening to a podcast today,
We surprised.
Shocker.
but in the podcast, he was talking about how we're all given to this ministry of reconciliation, and it's our job to help people and reconcile the hurt that is in their hearts. And there are people that walk into our church that they might have their defenses up because of where they come from, their culture, the color of their skin, whatever it is, and so they might be coming in desperate because somebody invited them. And it's our job to greet them and to say hello to them, to help reconcile
Yeah.
any hurt or anything, that they have in them
Yeah.
that is causing them to put up a wall.
Yeah.
It's our job as Christians to do that. And if we're not being hospitable, if we're not greeting people because we're intimidated by them, because we're fearful, because of maybe the way that they look, or because maybe they got a pocket full of weed and they smell like that, and so we don't want to associate with them, we can't really help reconcile them.
Yeah.
We can't step into that ministry.
So that's a perfect segue into our scriptures. So who has Hebrews? Who had my Hebrew scripture?
I do.
Amy, can you read those for me?
Let brotherly love continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares.
So, what this is referencing is back to Abraham. And he has an encounter with 3 angels that he hosts. And this scripture is calling that back and saying we need to be hospitable to everybody. And it calls out it specifically says strangers, because we don't know what their situation is. We don't know what they're coming into, what they're coming in from. But we also don't know what the heavenly impact of your hospitality can be for them. You could be hosting angels and not know. There could be blessings right in front of you. And if we try and pick and choose who we want to be hospitable to, you could miss it.
Right.
People could never come back. And what's the danger in that? Thankfully, they had lived and already had roots in it. And so they didn't give up and they continued searching. But let's look at somebody that didn't have those roots built. And they had that situation. What's the danger?
We don't have to promise they'll ever come back.
Absolutely.
They step in here one time. If they don't feel loved, they may never come back.
You only get one first impression.
Yes.
That's true.
Ashley, go ahead.
With the scripture.
Matthew 10:40.
He that receiveth you receiveth me, and he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me.
So, Jesus is actually speaking to his disciples here. He's getting ready to send them out, and he's giving them this statement where he's telling them, as you go out, understand you represent me. And so therefore, anybody who accepts you into their home is in turn accepting me. But isn't that same the other way? Here, let's just think about here on a Sunday morning. That's still true for us today. We are direct representation of Him. And so when people are coming in, the interaction that they feel from us, they're going to directly associate that to what they feel from Him. If they come in and they feel loved, if they come in and they feel embraced, and they feel connected, they're not just feeling connected to APC. They're not just feeling connected to Jessica or Ebony or that person that they met. They are in turn feeling connected to Jesus. Which is the goal, right? That should be the goal, the end goal ultimately, right? And so, that right there is why hospitality is so important. I have an article that's written about a guest experience, and the title of this article is "The Price of a Poor Experience." So a man by the name of Peter Bregman he says, "I was a member of this gym, which cost over $200 a month. But I had to put my account on freeze because of travel. I happened to be in New York and offered to bring my parents there for dinner. Even on freeze, so pays $200 a month for this membership. And then he says, well, I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to be going to the gym, so I need to put a freeze. To put his account on freeze, he still had to pay $40 a month. And so when he gets there, he's told a member can't use a guest pass because his account's on freeze. So he tries to use his guest pass. So then he, the typical next step, let me get a manager. The manager comes back and he even says, so my parents can't even come in with the guest pass? And the manager basically just repeats this process. And so then he writes, that got me thinking about the $40 fee. How can they get away with charging me for essentially canceling or putting my account on hold? And so he started looking and calling gyms around New York and was asking them, what is your freeze policy? And he was noticing a trend. The more expensive the gym, not only the higher monthly fee, but also the higher monthly freeze fee. But then when you got into the lower costing gyms, there was no freeze fee. And so he says, I would have thought that the more that I pay for a gym, the more privileges I would get, right? And what he found out was it's the complete opposite. But not just in gyms, let's think about hotels. When you think about, a nice hotel, we can talk about a Four Seasons, a Ritz-Carlton, 5 other ones that I can't even pronounce because they're in other languages. But these nice hotels, right? Versus Motel 8, things that we don't consider as nice. And when you look at these hotels, those expensive ones, not only do you pay for your room that night, but if you want to use internet, you have to pay additional for that. Versus when you go to these inexpensive ones, the internet's included. But yet, people are still willing to go pay the extra and go to the more expensive ones because of the experience that they feel when they're there. There was... He writes, he explains all of that, and then he goes on and he says, the critical mistake that the gym made was it treated me poorly. After that incident, my feelings about the gym changed dramatically. In a luxury business, it doesn't take much for someone to resent the fees they pay. And once that happens, the business dies. And he goes on to talk about a study that was done, and it was ran across businesses using quantitative data, and the first thing that was not found was that there was no correlation between membership and price increases. So essentially, people were willing to stay a member, even if you raised the price. They were willing to stay a member, but what he did find was there was a correlation between membership and the organization's net promoter score, which, if you're like me, you have no clue what that is. So here's what it is. That measures how likely a customer is to recommend that organization to a friend. And he writes, it turns out that if customers like an organization's product or service enough to recommend them to others, that organization can raise their prices and the customer won't even care. Doesn't matter. Doesn't affect them because they've already been bought in to the service. But that same customer, the moment their customer experience falls, they'll leave in a heartbeat. Product is important. But the way that people feel sets the stage. And that article was all about a test of people who already bought into the product. A test of people who had already been using the product for however long, and then the changes began to happen. That test didn't even look at people that had never signed up for a membership. That test wasn't looking for people that were coming in for the first time. And I'd be curious to see what the difference or the ratio in those numbers are, because if somebody's not yet bought in to this church thing, somebody's not yet bought in to Jesus and to what he can bring, and their first impression is not up to par, the product means nothing. They will not worry about the product at all if that experience is not where they want it to be. So I just want to hear where your guys' mind goes. And I'll give some answers that I've already reached out and gotten. But I want to ask this question. What is the article? What is the price of a poor customer experience? Or what is the cost? From our point of view, what would be the cost of somebody to have a poor experience? So I reached out to Pastor and asked him, and he said the price would be very high because no one wants to invest in something that makes them feel poorly. But people will invest in things that are terrible for them as long as it makes them feel good. Pastor Josh said, he started off with, I don't even know if this is a word, but unregainable. It would cost a lot because there's a possibility that you would never get that opportunity again. I reached out to Bradley, and Bradley said it brings a lack of confidence in your business product. Because if I can't trust the person who's selling it, how can I trust the product itself? Braden said it means the difference between a loyal customer and a one-time customer. People want a pleasant experience, not to feel like a burden. Brother Melder said you get a lost customer, a skeptical customer, and even negative gossip about your business or your product. But then he changed it up and he gave a positive perspective. And he said, but on the other hand, it also gives you an opportunity to apologize and to discuss and possibly build an even stronger relationship than before. Brother Darren said a similar thing. He said, to me, the price would be priceless because it's a learning experience and it's a growing experience. And then Brother Paul said, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And it's hard to change that impression if it's wrong because most people won't give you a second chance to prove it. So this whole lesson tonight, back up. Anybody want to add their opinion on that? What would be the price or what would be the cost of a poor experience? When we talk about hosting in God's house. And then the second part of the title for tonight is greeting people in APC. So what would be our price or what would be our cost to pay of somebody having a poor customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's everybody's going to say the same thing, but I mean, so I'll take it one step further, not to be, I said this before, everybody laughed, but not to be doomsday Darren, but, I really wonder, I really do wonder how God sees that. I wonder if somebody left because they come into the church and they, the first person they seen was me and I was crabby or I was fighting with my wife or I was having a disagreement with somebody else in the foyer and they seen that and they left and let's say something, happened to them, with their blood being in my hands. That's a pretty high cost.
Absolutely.
I think it goes further than the foyer we were talking about earlier. Les and I visit churches quite a bit. We went to one church and felt so welcome. We went to a church recently, and these are Pentecostal churches. We were greeted at the door, it was great. But after church, not one person came up to us. And what did we say to each other on the way home? Never going back there. And we had friends at the church. I said, why do I want to come here if nobody's going to at least say hi to me? Because down the road is another Pentecostal church that if we go back to that town, I can go to visit that church. And that's what we have here. How many churches are in Bloomington Normal?
Yeah.
They're going to look for not just that greeter at the front door, but after service, this or that or whatever they're going to be talked to. Are they going to have the same mindset as me? Why do I want to go back there when there's another church that preaches the truth that I can go to?
Well, and
Kind of going off on a little bit of a...
I was going to go on a tangent too.
Well, you
Well,
guys got to rock,
take me out
paper,
of that.
scissors. We don't got time for two.
Well, I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna make the decision. But I can't remember if we were at Because of the Times or where it was, but somewhere along the line I wrote down some notes and it said that every visitor should be like a VIP guest. They should all be treasured, like from front to back, the whole time. And I don't know if I made this up or what, but I can't find any notes. But we need to not be sitting there when we have visitors or when visitors come in and talking to the people that we always get to talk to, but making sure that we get to that we're, spending time and investing. As an example, we had our Foodies and Friends on Monday. It was Monday, not Tuesday. And I sat there next to my friend, and I didn't get to talk to anybody. I did like a quick run around, and then it was my job to give her my undivided attention so that she felt welcome, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. And sometimes we want to talk to our friends, and I'm guilty of it. We want to go to our comfort zones. We don't want to talk to these new people. We have so many new people here, and they all do need to be treated like VIP, and we all need to do it because you can't do it all. You can't do it all.
Yeah.
Ebony can't do it all. We all have, to do it. And I think we're doing a good job at that, because of the people I'm talking about, they're same names. Jessica's always one of them.
Yeah. Good.
I think we lose sight of something, and I need to say this, because we lose sight of, we look at the new person. It's not just the new person. Okay, let's get that straight.
Yeah.
It's the one that comes every Sunday that you don't say nothing to.
Yeah.
And they're yearning for somebody to walk up to them and embrace them in some form of fashion, whether it's in verbally a hug or a handshake or praise the Lord or, how you doing? What's your name?
Yeah. And to tag off of that, and a little bit of what Allison was saying is, I've actually read both sides of this. I've read that yes, treat first-time guests as VIPs, but I've also read to not treat them as VIPs because then it's expected.
Well, yeah.
And so then at what point, and I don't know, I'm not asking for an answer, but at what point as ourselves do we reflect like, how do we as a body of Christ touch all of the bodies that are of Christ? Like how, we know that we need to be intentional with first-time guests and first-time visitors, but what about our own church body?
Yeah.
And things like that. So I kind of like that actually, I don't remember what I read or where I heard it, but it was interesting their take on not to treat them as a VIP.
Yeah.
Good point.
So we'll get into it because I do have a point later that says don't treat them. They don't want to be treated like VIP. They want to be treated like family.
Yeah.
The context that Allison gave of VIP, I think, is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll dive into it when we get there. But they both match because I heard the same thing. But here's what I want to throw this quote out there because this is kind of where I started this whole thing. And it was this. People don't remember all of what you say, but they will remember exactly how you make them feel. And where I went from there, I was able to get to this. A good host sends their guests away feeling welcomed, included, and satisfied. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves, at the end of their visit, what is our legacy of hospitality? When people leave, whenever they're here, when they leave this building, what legacy of hospitality was set or built or maintained that day? And so tonight, my goal is to kind of try my best to break down how we can make sure that our guests are leaving feeling welcomed, included, and satisfied. And then potentially, and hopefully, right, be able to answer what's our legacy with a raving 5-star review. Because that's what we would hope for. There's 3 points that I want to hit on tonight to kind of help explain and break this down. The first one's going to be the importance of a first impression, which we've kind of already spent some time on tonight. The second one is going to be feeling over function. And then the third one is going to be unreasonable hospitality. So let's jump in the first one. Importance of a first impression. Why are first impressions important? Anybody? Why? Why does it matter? Why does the first impression matter so much?
Because you don't have any predetermined ideas about something. If I've never been to a church before, and someone's like, okay, let's go to church, I have no frame of reference. I have nothing in my head about what a church is like. And so my first impression, that is how I will define church. So the first impression is, it sets the tone for the rest of how you look at that.
I think, I mean, and to go opposite of the way she went is, I think a majority of people have an idea that Pentecostals are nuts.
Sure, there we are.
And so I think first impression for us is even more important, because your first impression is not only a first impression, but it's also to change their mind.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of people that come in that never been to a Pentecostal church probably come in hesitant,
Sure.
probably under an invitation, and like, I don't know, you know, they're pretty nuts, they're crazy, I don't know if I want to go or not. And so I think ours is more important than others. And I think oftentimes the Pentecostals, from my experience in many different churches, we take ourselves too serious. You know, we have the truth, and we know we're going to heaven, and so we have that, get right or go to hell attitude. And you can go to any charismatic church in town, and everybody there is bubbly and happy and crazy and just over the top, super, super, super good at this. And you come into a Pentecostal church, and everybody just has that get right or go to hell look on their face. And I think, and I'm not saying like that's necessarily the way we are here, but you understand what I'm saying? I think it's extremely important for us to be good at this and get better at this, because people coming in our doors already think we're crazy. So we need to change their mind and prove them wrong all at one shot.
Well, it goes deeper than crazy too. A lot of people have a stigma around that we're judgy.
Sure.
And they think, when what we call holy and modest, they call judgment and rules. I mean, I had an interaction with one of my supervisors at work where she was literally talking about that. So a lot of people's mindsets are that anything around apostolic or Pentecostal is they're immediately going to be judged when they walk in and look different. Mm-hmm. When they walk in and don't look just like we do. And so it is super important that we can change that mindset, because if somebody's sitting in the pew skittish the whole day, is the true impact really able to hit? But if their mind can kind of be put at ease the moment they come in the door and they realize everything I've been told is that's not what I'm getting here, and they can just be relaxed and fully take in what's happening in the service.
That is the testimony of some people that come here. Like we do, like just to say, like there is, I know someone that comes here that was absolutely against us and everything that we stood for, and only came for our family and like the scripture.
I don't know about y'all, but I don't get that. People that I've talked to in like my work environments and things like that, there are no preconceived notions of Pentecost. So like for me, when I invite them to church, or even for myself, when I went to church, when I went to my first Pentecostal service, I had no idea what to expect. And Philip talked me through it. He said, you may see some people with the power of God and maybe move differently. You may see we worship freely. We don't stay at our pew. We don't kneel at our pew. You can if you want. Those types of things. And I find like in my work my work groups and my work environments and just different people that I've talked to, when I say where I'm from or what church I go to, they're like, oh, what's that? And then I'm able to kind of maybe not necessarily give them any, I don't know. I either like pull up our YouTube channel or I'll pull up our social media channels and kind of say, hey, we're charismatic in our worship and things like that. But I don't know. Maybe there are people that have already a preconceived notion, but I'm just not.
I think
What's in our heads.
Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe.
I for sure
Well,
experienced a lot.
I mean,
Ideas, for sure.
I don't think we're nuts.
I mean, people have ideas of what, again, going off my own interactions, ideas of what apostolic or Pentecostal means, but none of it is like, oh, that's terrible. A lot of it's just blatantly wrong.
Right.
So those are cool opportunities to open up dialogue and go say, guys, this is how this is. And I mean, those are nice opportunities
For sure.
to open up doors, especially to say, no, it's not, you don't have to dress a certain way to walk into our doors.
Yeah.
You don't have to worship a certain way to walk into our doors.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like.
Yeah. So specifically in regards to church, the reason that the first impression is so important is because studies show majority of your guests will make the decision on whether they will ever come back before the service ever starts. Before our first song ever starts, people have already made up their mind. I will or will not come back. And I don't know about you guys. Me, personally, if I already know I'm never going to come back here, everything that happens after that decision's made is just kind of in one ear and out the other. Like now I just am staying because I don't want to be rude and dip out halfway through. But they're so important because before they ever get to witness worship, before they ever get to witness what takes place, before they ever get to hear God's word, people have already made their mind up. Will I come back or will I not?
I think that it can go further than the 4 year as well. Chase and I have a disciple couple that we have been working with for several years now. And they actually went through a Bible study and had a little bit of a sour impression through the Bible study. And then when we got in contact with them and got to knowing them a little better, we had to transform that attitude from the Bible study to get them into the doors of the church. And then when they got here, they were awed.
Yeah.
They loved it. They don't come as frequently as I would like them to,
Sure.
but they do know that that option is here and
Sure.
they're welcoming to it.
Sure. So, our goal, when we're talking about hosting visitors at APC, our goal is to make them feel comfortable and feel at ease. People do not want to be met at the front, their first time here, being pressured into giving, joining small groups, volunteering for anything. They just want to be comfortable. And this is where that we don't want to make a guest feel like VIP. We want them to feel like family. And what I mean by that is, there's a reason that we don't have a section of pews segmented off saying guests only. Because now all attention is there. There's a reason we don't parade them across the stage and all of that and make them up front, out flashy. Look, we have visitors. They don't want that. They just want to feel like family. Now, they may want to feel VIP in the aspect of they want to know that somebody genuinely cares about them. And they want to have your undivided attention and not just be a number that walked through the door. But really, if we can just shoot to make them feel like they were family, our chances of them wanting to come back go way up. The second one was feeling over function. So what do I mean by feeling over function? We can have all of the processes in place that we want to have. We can have the best parking strategy, best parking attendance, we can have the best hosts, we can have our Connect cards, we can have goodie bags, whatever. Fill in the blank with whatever process you want. But the real question that we have to ask ourselves is, how did they feel when they left? Because we can get their information, but getting a name and a phone number and an email does not guarantee that they will ever come back.
Or if it's the right one.
Well, yeah, then there's that, right? We don't even know if they gave the right phone number. No.
Just thinking out loud, sorry.
No, for
No,
sure.
it happens.
But we can have function and we can have process. But if they don't leave feeling loved and they don't leave feeling welcomed and included, just because they gave us their name and number, that doesn't tie them into coming back. They didn't sign a contract saying, I will come back X amount of times in the year. All they did was just give a name. We don't even know if it's right. When you look at studies, you have to know your audience as well. That's another thing. You have to understand who we are attracting. Now, this falls into marketing a little bit. The podcast I was listening to, when they were breaking this down and explaining this, they were talking about from a marketing sense of you have to be intentional. If you want to attract a more younger crowd, have a more younger crowd up in front. If you want to attract an older crowd, have a more older crowd more involved and out front. But then they started talking about, they went deeper into attracting a younger crowd and started talking about younger generations. We do a fantastic job of kind of the medium, right? It's not all young, it's not all old, so we get kind of a happy mix of everything there. But they went and they said these younger generations are getting less and less willing to provide information. They're willing to give a first name, but they're less and less likely to give anything else. Roughly only about half are comfortable to even give you their last name. And then it gets even worse, only 30% are willing to provide an email. So what we have to ask ourselves is, what is more important? Feeling or function? Is it more important that we make sure that Connect card has to be filled out? They came in the door, they have to get the Connect card, they have to get the goodie bag, but they leave feeling like I just went through a process. They just handed me off to the next one, and off to the next one, and off to the next one, and then I left. Or are they leaving feeling like they were wanted, and like we want them to come back, and that they're welcome to come back? And so, what's more important? Feeling or function? Getting their info helps with the follow-up process, right? We can reach out to them, we can try and connect with them, we can do whatever we want there. But again, just because we reach out does not ensure that they will ever come back.
All right.
Do you have something to go? Okay. So next was unreasonable hospitality. I was listening to a TED Talk, and it was the owner of a restaurant in New York called 11 Madison Park. His name's Will. Will got to this restaurant at about in 2006, and the restaurant was just kind of like a mid-level, like nothing crazy. If you wanted to go, you went. If you didn't, you didn't really share it. It was just kind of mediocre. And when he sold it in 2020, it was actually ranked the #1 restaurant in the world. And so he goes to break down what allowed them to make that jump. And what he says this by, he says our service was so gracious and so close to perfect. And if you just Google the dining room, and I did, and I wish I would have had pictures of it, but Google it. If you just look at their dining room, it's cool. And it just screams, I can't afford that. And their food was fantastic. It was elegant. It tasted great. And it was those things that allowed them to stay in the conversation of a top 50 restaurant. But guess what it was that propelled them to the #1 spot? A hot dog.
Did they make sure it was the best hot dog in the world?
So he goes to break. At first I was like, there's no way. There's no way, right? And so he goes to tell this story. And what he says is it was a busier than normal lunch service. And so he stepped out of his normal process and just was helping. And he went over to clean off a table that had just finished their appetizers. And this table ended up being for foodies, people that just travel just to try food. And they were actually on vacation in New York, and they were headed to the airport to go back home. And so as he's cleaning their table, he's just kind of listening to the conversation. And they start listing all these fancy places that they ate, how great the food was. And before he leaves, he hears one of them finish the conversation with, yeah, but the only thing we didn't get to try was a New York City hot dog. So Will gets all the dirty dishes to the kitchen, sets them down, and runs down the street to a hot dog stand and buys a $2 hot dog and then runs back to the restaurant. And then he goes on and he says, and now came the hard part, which then I was listening and I was like, I don't running down the street for a hot dog sounded pretty hard. But now came he had to now try and convince a 4-star chef to serve a hot dog. So after debate and, he said delivery. I call it debate. There was argument for sure. This chef finally gives in. He pretties it up. He puts his little chef's touch on it. And they send out this hot dog. And Will takes this hot dog out as the last set of their meal, because I guess you get multiple courses. So this hot dog is the final part. And he says in his 14 years at that restaurant, he never saw anybody react the way that those 4 did to a hot dog. All the way to the point of saying, not just that this was the best food that they had on their trip, but that this was the best memory and the best part of this trip in general. A $2 hot dog. That's it. And when looking back at this experience, he realized the restaurant, the service, the food, and the design were all simply just ingredients in the recipe of human connection. And that is hospitality. And so this experience led him to ask himself, what happened so that this could happen, and what needed to happen so that it could happen all the time. And he came up with this. The first point, be present. That's it. Just be present. Now, obviously that probably seems cliche and overused, but what does it really mean to be present? That means that you care so much about the thing you're doing or the person that you're with that you stop caring about everything else that you need to do. He could have very easily just thought, well, we're busy. This is a restaurant. We're busy. We're trying to get people out. We're trying to make money. I just need to get these plates and go. I just need to make sure get to the next job, the next task. But if he had not been present, he would have missed a simple comment that he was then able to act on and change this experience altogether. It's essential in delivering unreasonable hospitality. So often, we can find ourselves with such a long to-do list that we're not able to just kind of slow down and just listen to the people around us. Had he not been present, he would have missed it. The second thing that he says here is, take what you do seriously without taking yourself too seriously. Way too often in customer service, there's self-imposed standards that get in the way of us being able to give customers the thing that they actually want. Think about this. 4-star restaurant, ranked #1 restaurant in the world. They could have been so caught up in themselves and the standard of their food that they could have missed this experience. But they were able to take what they do, which the big picture there was just be hospitable. Make sure the customer leaves feeling satisfied and like they got everything that they want. And so they stepped out of their process and served a $2 hot dog. And the last part of unreasonable hospitality is realizing that if you want to give people a sense of genuine belonging, it is one size fits one. Hospitality is about making people feel seen. And the best way to do that is not to treat them like a commodity, but rather like a unique individual. Will goes on to say, I probably could have went out to this table and comped them whatever bottle of expensive champagne they wanted. I could have gave them a free expensive meal. I could have gave them a free dessert. I could have done a lot of different things, but ultimately, that would not have given them the experience that they truly wanted. And this whole situation led Will to create a new position in his restaurant. And they called this position the Dream Weaver. And the sole responsibility of the Dream Weaver was to help everybody else bring their ideas to life. And so, for example, they had a family that came in and was telling them that they wanted to come to this restaurant to kind of ease their sorrows because their flight for their beach vacation was canceled. And so they weren't able to go. This Dream Weaver, at the end of their meal, took them into the private dining room where the Dream Weaver had filled the room with sand, with folding chairs, all the way to putting a kiddie pool filled with water so that they had something to dip their feet into, to make sure that that family, those individuals, had a unique experience that tailored specifically to them. All of this, going from a mediocre restaurant to being considered in the top 50, going all the way to number 1, done simply by having an unreasonable desire to provide each person with their own personal experience. There's a businessman by the name, I call him Gary V because there's no way I'm getting the last name right. But he tells a story of a customer he had who ordered a $117 case of wine. And on a flight, he just started doing some research into this customer. And so he goes on Twitter and he starts seeing that this guy is tweeting constantly. Like nothing but tweets about Jay Cutler. So Gary calls one of his employees and says, get on eBay, buy a signed Jay Cutler jersey, send it to him, and add a note in there saying thank you for your purchase and thank you for shopping with us. Now the jersey ended up being $350. So Gary V pays $350 for this jersey, plus shipping, whatever, to send to this person that only spent $117. So he put more into the customer than the customer put into him. But what happened a few months later was Gary gets a call from his thank you department, as he calls it, and the lady said, you need to look at the order we just got. So he pulls it up and he looks at the order, and in the comment section, the order is for $4,500 worth of product. And so in the comment section, he sees this. You guys sent my friend John a Chicago Bears jersey, and he told me the story, which is the only reason that I even found out about you. P.S. Great price on red burgundy. P.S.S. I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. Your genuine time and attention is a pretty insignificant investment in what will hopefully become a lifelong relationship. The thing that matters more to any customer is intent and effort. If we can simply just be present with the people we are interacting with and don't get caught up in everything that we think we have to do and don't get caught up in process after process after process and just be present with them and just make true connection and give them genuine time and attention and effort, you'd be surprised at the relationships that can be built on the backs of that. He's gaining customers from a simple task of just doing a little bit of research to make this a genuine experience and a personal experience. And because of that, to me, what seems like a silly investment of more than what that guy was willing to pay ends up multiplying by a lot later on. And so again, I go back to the question, now that we've broken all this down, why is it so important? And what is the true cost of a poor experience? Because if we can be present with the people, and if we can take what we're doing serious, but not be too serious, that we're just focused on the wrong parts of it, I think we can obtain people leaving here feeling welcomed, included, and satisfied, which ultimately, again, raises the chances of them coming back for a second time and allowing God to change their life and impact their life. Did you put a timer on me?
Listen, you start serving hot dogs and wine in the morning, I'm
Straight.
here. I'll come back.
You may never leave.
Coming from the hospitality aspect, I have came into this church and it felt, and nobody spoke to me in that doorway, but it was a younger generation. I feel like everybody from the hospitality staff should be in here to learn this because of that. I mean, I'm Amy. I'm gonna make it work because I'm bubbly and I try to be friendly with everybody. But it could have been, what if it was that visitor that came in that day and nobody spoke? There was 3 people out there. Nobody spoke to me and I got through. But it's just that easy though. That younger generation needs to be talked to.
But
They need to sit in here.
It's not always the younger generation. You're
It
right.
was
You're right.
in that instance.
I had to teach myself because I helped on Sunday mornings. For years, I was too busy to talk to anybody. At least I thought. I was always running around doing this and that. And I realized, how would I feel if some dude just ran past me because he's too busy with a piece of paper in his hand, or whatever. And it hit me. And I think it's Stan Gleason that said, walk through the crowd slowly. I think it was him. And I started listening to that, and I'm like, I have time to shake this one's hand. Just, hey, how's it going today? And you said it. It can be a visitor. It can be, maybe that person's going through a tough time.
True.
And I think that it's not just the younger generation. It's everybody. Don't just go running through, but go through and be the hospitality, even if you're not on the hospitality team.
I was just going to say that.
I don't think it has to be just visitors.
Right,
Like
right,
our
right.
church family needs greeted
Yes.
just as much.
I feel
Well,
like-
yeah, so I agree. So I will, so the reason that tonight focused on visitors was
Right.
because the title of the class was inviting guests.
Right.
But 100% agreed. It can't. There's no shouldn't. It cannot stop there.
No.
Right.
I mean, we just heard a couple that said they may have been a visitor to that church, but ultimately they're not guests.
Right.
It can't stop there. It has to go past. And again, hospitable does not stop at the hosting team. That's why I pulled in scriptures. It's biblical that we are hospitable to people. That's not it's biblical and it's applicable to the hosting staff. That's not that it's applicable to pastor. That's Bible. That is everybody. That's all of us. We have to be, it's crucial across the board that we make sure that anybody leaves this place feeling welcomed and included and feeling ultimately like family.
I think the root of all of it is like you just show God's love. Like we were talking about, you have to be Jesus. And I think one of the things that I'm actually encouraged by in just on Sunday mornings, the way we're moving towards everyone in the sanctuary at 9 a.m. by prayer. I think that's a really good way to centralize and to make sure that we're connected with the one who we're trying to pour his love out to everyone. And I think that just it should come off naturally, like the love of Jesus for everyone. Like if you see them the way Jesus sees them, he has so much grace for us, and it's just insurmountable love for us. Like we should just want to give that to just everyone that comes through the door, whether they're first-time guests or they're not.
Well, and if you think about, if we do it correctly, right? It shouldn't just be, here's a card, fill it out, put it in the offering plate. There has to be connection and there has to be conversation. And if that's happening correctly, the host should be, right? We should have, hopefully we get enough guests coming in that however many people we have scheduled that day are so busy in conversation and connection that there are people that will slip through. But again, if it's done correctly, there should always be somebody ready to step in and catch that person. I agree. I think the meeting at 9 is so important, and what I would encourage everybody in here to do at some point in that prayer is specifically ask God for faces of people that you need to connect with that day. Because it's easy, I'll say it, it's easy to think, well, they've been here for years, they're all right. Doesn't mean it's right. And so be intentional with that. Pray specifically for that. Show me somebody who just needs a how's it going, a hug, a handshake. Anybody else want to add anything?
She is doing moral support.
Yep.
No, I did send him a message and he was going to remind me to say it because
I forgot.
I saw a quote this week and it just said, leave people better than you found them. And people are going to come here and they're going to be sad, they're going to be hurting. Put the effort in, make them happy before they leave, I want to come back.
I got a tip. Don't take this the wrong way, but it has happened. It has happened to us. Don't get upset. And don't show what your facial expression shows a lot. But if you walk in the church and somebody's sitting in your seat, I mean to say this, I gotta get this off my chest. Don't that control, that can push people away. You look, why are they sitting in my seat? You know I sit there. I sit there every Sunday. Why are you sitting in my seat? And in my defense, I'm saying that because it was said to us, and it was a hurtful feeling. It was a hurtful thing. So I mean, just
There's no names on the pews for a reason.
And I've heard pastors say that before too. But I'm just saying, people have you have your seat. You sit in that seat every Sunday. And you come in and somebody's sitting in your seat, whether they're a visitor or whether they're a member. You can't, please.
I see hop all the time.
You're gonna have the whole church in your row on Sunday.
That's everybody.
Me?
I'm just gonna go sit in that seat. I'm just saying, that's a hurtful feeling.
Yeah.
So when you do hospitality, you don't have to say anything. What I'm trying to get at is sometimes you don't have to say anything to a person for them to see your facial expression. Your facial expression should show love at all times.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest things that we don't pay attention to,
Okay.
is how we look at
It's
people.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do have your pantry box.
No, we don't have a mirror, but you know how you look.
Let's close out in prayer. One last thing I want to just throw is that first impression piece and that hospitality piece is not just confined to these walls. When you're on your job site, you're still represented, right? That scripture we read where Jesus was speaking to his disciples, he was sending them out. That was not a scripture where he was saying, as people come to you, he was sending them out and saying, you represent me. And so when we're at work, when we're at the store, when we're at a restaurant, anywhere, understand you can be hospitable there. You are setting a first impression there. So it's not just confined here. So that's what I want to challenge is, let's be intentional on asking for those situations, but asking also for the guidance on how to act and make sure that we're prepared in those situations. Let's pray. Oh God, we thank you, Jesus, for the ability to come together and hear your voice, you, God, and we thank you for all of your opportunities.